I'm proud about the National Health Service. It's a piece of real socialism.
It's a real privilege to be before you today, speaking at the AGM for an organisation that shares my values, and I always watch with interest what you're doing and what you're campaigning on. So it's a real privilege, and to be honest, I don't get nervous that much now about speaking. But today I was a little bit nervous on what to go on, what to speak about, because we could probably speak for the next hour and a half about so many issues which you're seeing on the front line and I'm seeing from a political point of view in the constituency. So what I'll do is I'll just give an overview of the wider determinants of health. I'll certainly touch on the Right to Food campaign, which I believe encapsulates your values of collectivism, campaigning against the inequalities that we see in our community. And I'll just touch on some constituency issues which I believe the neoliberal agenda the last 40 years has really brought to the fore now. And we're seeing it on a daily basis. We're seeing the effects of them decisions that were made politically over the last 40 years by governments of all colours, and the impact that they're actually having now. Which is so severe. So I'll just touch on that, and then I think be open to questions then, and then we can have a discussion. But as I say, it's a privilege to be here today, and it's been quite a busy week. I've just come off the phone to one of the French dailies talking about what happened in Paris, and obviously we're playing Real Madrid again for them. Anybody that knows the football and the injustice of what happened in Paris, that really brings home. We had the urgent question on Wednesday in the chamber about the apology from the police, the first apology for 34 years on Hillsborough, and I know I've got Nathan from COVID Justice on this call, who's a good friend, fantastic campaigner, and obviously a key part of the Hillsborough Law Now campaign. So, as I said, it's a privilege. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm the Member of Parliament for Liverpool West Derby. I was elected in 2019, proudly standing on the manifesto. That was, I know, to be absolutely transformational and would have made such a difference to the country and where we are now. Before I got involved in politics, as Mark alluded to, I'd worked for a trade union. From 16 to the age of 40, I was a printer. No political ambition whatsoever. And then I went on strike for 6 months. We lost our job. The factory shut down. I ended up becoming a cab driver. Then I ended up working for United Union as a trade union organiser, a job which I loved. And then I ended up going to work for Dan Carden in 2017. And in 2019, I was asked to stand as the Member of Parliament for Liverpool West Derby in between coming a councillor. So it was a political journey which I never, ever envisaged, but we are where we are now, and I am a proud Member of Parliament for the Labour Party and Liverpool West Derby. But I think it's important that you know as well that before in becoming into politics, always been a community activist, always defended my communities from nefarious council plans or corporate entities like Liverpool Football Club, and I'm a massive Liverpool football fan, but the club done some terrible things to my community. And also in 2015, as a direct result of what we're seeing in our communities, with Dave Kelly and Robbie Daniels, we set up Fan Support and Food Banks, which was a national grassroots organisation of football supporters who come together to tackle food insecurity, and that weaves into the Right to Food campaign, which I'll touch on in a second. But I think just to open, and obviously this will feed into the Q&A, I think what we're seeing now, to my mind, is the consequences of 40 years of neoliberal agenda, which is prioritising profit over public good. are worlds away from the Bevan vision of how society must function for health, health equality and social justice. And, you know, I could speak all day about what we're seeing in my community, but yesterday I had a couple of midwives come in and they'd emailed me, they'd see me do a presentation on the right to food to some medical practitioners in Liverpool the other month. So they said, can we come in and have a chat with you? We like what you were saying, but, you know, we want to tell you about what's happening on, you know, and on the ground. You've got to have an understanding of what's happening. And for 45 minutes, it was one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had in my life, to be honest, when you're seeing these two midwives speak about what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, both in the NHS and wider society, and the consequences of the destruction of both the NHS, but also council services, and the opportunities to keep people alive and healthy slipping between the fingers at a rate of knots. And it was heartbreaking, to be honest, when you just felt completely powerless. You were talking about people coming to the mothers who hadn't ate for 3 to 4 days, near state of collapse, because the only way they could survive, or the kids could survive, was for them to be fed and them to go hungry. And graphically telling me what was happening there. The situation with private landlords, which I'll probably touch on later on, but, you know, now with the cost of living crisis, private landlords putting the onus onto tenants who can't afford to pay the increases in mortgage rates, and, you know, universal credit benefits do not, housing benefits don't cover what the landlords want, so they're ending up in hotels and bringing families up in one room, and going against everything that the midwives are trying to teach about ensuring that your young baby stays safe. And they felt completely powerless. They felt, it's hard to put into words, really, what they felt. And then it was about, you know, what can I do as a backbench MP? What can we do to make sure that the midwives' voices are heard? You know, make sure that, you know, we can ensure that the mothers who are struggling so badly at the moment, the mothers who have not yet given birth, but can't afford to go get to the hospital for checkups, can't afford the buses, so things aren't getting checked that should be checked, because they just cannot afford bus fares to get to the Royal Women Liverpool's hospital. And the midwives were just heartbroken by what was happening, and their inability, obviously, to do their job to the full capability to ensure the safety of the mothers and the mothers-to-be and the children and the families. So it really brought home to me what was happening when you get that sort of graphic illustration. So I'll be working with the midwives. We're going to try and ensure we get a Westminster Hall debate on, you know, sudden infant mortality rise during the cost of living crisis. And I think, you know, after coming out of there, and then you see the huge profits that are getting made by the likes of Shell, and the transfer of wealth, you know, from the 99 to the 1%, and hearing the consequences, you know, of people who they couldn't get into hospital quick enough, dying from conditions which were treatable. And, you know, one of the midwives had lost a mother-in-law over the Christmas, and it was to a treatable form of cancer. But unfortunately, they couldn't get it before a specialist in time, and she died. And that'll be told countlessly. We know the statistics of people needlessly dying, and, you know, it's all a consequence of what's happening now on the ground, which you, as an organisation, so fantastically fight against. But yeah, it was a tough one, and I will do everything I can to make sure the midwives' voices are heard, and we raise public awareness about, you know, what is happening, and also, you know, the grotesque inequalities of what we're seeing. And, you know, when I left them, you know, you're thinking, you know, is this the 21st century, or are we going back into the 19th century? But painting a really disturbing picture, because there's no other way to paint that. But and I touch on, obviously, we're seeing the re-emergence of the trade union movement. We're seeing people aware now that, you know, enough really is enough. We can touch on them campaigns later on as well. But to bring a little bit of optimism, I'd like just to touch on the Right to Food campaign, because I think it's a fantastic example of what can be achieved collectively by people coming together, both politicians, community activists, the people who underpin society. So we've had lots of people come together on the Right to Food campaign. So if you give me a couple of minutes just to, if anybody's not aware of what's actually being achieved and what's actually hopefully going to be achieved, and it ties into it exactly what you are as an association, which is fighting inequality within our communities, and the NHS is the bedrock of that. And this is right, I'll touch on this now. So I think where we are, certainly as a city, if I can speak from a Liverpool perspective, because we know nationwide as well, but at the moment, 1 in 3 in Liverpool at the moment are food insecure, which is staggering from a city of 500,000 people, and that's getting worse every day. We've got 11 million people across the country that are food insecure. And what we've said is the time for sticking plasters is over. In Liverpool last year, we fed 100,000 people with fan support and food banks, the mobile pantry project, what we've got set up, which ensures people get a decent, delivery of food, healthy food, at a lower rate, like a cooperative club, which people join, and we're proud of that. But it's a sticking plaster. This is now that model's getting replicated. We're working with people at St. Helens, we're going to Newcastle, we're working across the country on the model, but it's a sticking plaster. And that's why the right to food is so crucial. We must eradicate food banks. We must eradicate what we're seeing in our communities, the hunger, because the ramifications for future generations are absolutely immense, and the future of this country. So, at the moment, I've got constituents unable to cook a meal, put the heating on, choosing between heating and eating, and I think, as I've touched on, the intergenerational impacts of this, and this within your roles within the medical profession, are huge. I speak to professional Ian Sinner about it on a regular basis from Alderley Hospital, and this is now a humanitarian crisis enveloping our communities, and it's recognised by yourselves on the front line as such. And I think what we've tried to put into people's minds with the right to food is it's a political choice. We see the vast amounts of money that governments have spent and gone into the wrong pockets during COVID. We see the huge profits which are getting made by multinational companies who do not pay the levels of tax which you should be paying. We see the huge transfer of wealth to individuals who don't pay tax, and without that tax, we don't get that benefit, that healthy society which we all aim for. So hunger is a political choice, and the people at the top of governments have got the levers to pull to make sure that a right to food could come into, come to fruition. Been watching with interest Michael Marmite as well, who you all know, and in the Food Foundation report, he says if 1 household in 7 is food insecure, society is failing in a fundamental way. And that's what we've been saying since 2019, since it come into problem. But the chilling thing is, which he goes on to say, is the problem is solvable, but far from getting solved, it's worse. And that's why we believe the right to food is absolutely essential as a keystone in fighting food poverty and bringing that into legislation and making that accountability elements of it. Which has parallels with Hillsborough Law as well, which is frightening, but that's where we are at the moment. And in 2019, as I said, the manifesto which I proudly stood on, it was a right to food was within that. And what we've started to do is ensure that it stays in an active manifesto, but also frame it in a way where people understand what a right to food can look like, because it's quite it can be quite an academic concept. What would the right to food look like in lives? So during the campaign, during COVID, we went across the country, Zooms in all major cities, towns. Anybody who got in touch with us who wanted to speak about what a right to food would look like. And from that, working with SHA AGM, Ian Sinner, health professionals, people who are on the front line fighting food poverty, we come up with 5 asks, which we felt was a starting point for the right to food, and which we could then utilise as a campaign to get into people's minds, to demand change, to demand that it is not normal. It is not normal that 1 in 3 people in this city in Liverpool, and that's replicated across all communities in London. We had Sadiq Khan before us on the Levelling Up and Housing Committee Select on Monday, and the picture he was painting in London is absolutely devastating. And this campaign is growing at a rate of knots. But what we wanted to do was put 5 key demands into a framework which we submitted to the National Food Strategy, which Andy Dimbleby was putting together on the behest of the government, and the first one since 46, I think, and he was tasked with that. So we wanted to put a right to food within that. So I spoke to Henry. He said, go out and listen, whatever the people say, you come back and report that. So we did that. We've done a comprehensive, as I said, consultation, and we come up with 5 key demands. Number 1, universal free school meals for every single child in this country on so many levels. You know, if the state legislates that you've got a duty to put your child into school, but the state should be legislating that every child, regardless of the economic background, will go into that place of education, fed, warm, and ensure that they can reach a maximum potential, which is not happening at the moment. As you know, and I know, there's 4 million kids at the moment going hungry. There's kids falling asleep at the desks. This is, for me, you know, a symbol of class war, really, because speaking to people who've gone to private schools who are in a different world to where we are now, I see kids in my community that cannot educate because they're worried, because they're hungry. And universal free school meals on so many levels is the right thing to do. And obviously we've got campaigns about, you know, making sure that everybody on universal credit gets the free school meal. But for me, the Right to Food campaign, everybody who's involved in it believes that universal free school meals are absolutely fundamental to the future of this country. And the thing is, they're not even cost neutral. You know, I think one of the eminent financial companies, PCW, done a report which over 20 years, you're probably looking at £100 billion in savings to the economy, to health, to well-being. It's a no-brainer. So that's fundamental key part of a Right to Food campaign. Next, the government must, of any colour, come before Parliament and explain within a benefit payment or a minimum wage payment what elements of that is sufficient to ensure that the person in receipt of that payment can live in a dignified manner. So we haven't got this explosion of food banks which we've seen since 2010. That's key. Accountability to government departments, shine a light on what's actually getting paid, and then we can begin to eradicate what we're seeing in our communities and begin to look at a much fairer and just society, and maybe questions to come on that. Also, we've got independence in enforcement of legislation. It must have enforcement powers, and a new regulatory body be granted to hold the government, whatever colour, to account. Then we've got the community kitchens element, which we done a template in Liverpool in October called Scouse Kitchens. We took one of the schools in my constituency, we turned it into a restaurant. The kids booked a table with the families, extended families. We worked with a non-profit school food organisation, and we created something fantastic for the week, which was a template for hopefully Liverpool City Council and other city councils and authorities to look at, because unfortunately for so many in our community at the moment, schools are the only resource that we've actually got because of 12 years austerity and the decimation of services. We've got to utilise schools, and we've got to utilise them for the benefits of the community, and that's what we've done as a template that was very successful. It's a key part of the Right to Food, and also ensuring food security, and that takes on so many different elements. You know, from fair wage payments to people who are actually producing the food, to the secure food transport, to planning when you're putting together your local community. What do we need to ensure that people can live well with the diet that's being prepared for them, which is absolutely key. So it should be imbued into all elements of council planning, a Right to Food. And, you know, since 2019, when we brought this together. We created this template. Right across the country, there's no way to describe it. We've got right as food at the top of the political agenda. We've got hunger as a political choice getting used by lots and lots of people now because it is. And, I'm sure you're all aware that the statistics, they're absolutely devastating. I think 500,000 parcels were handed out to families in January to March. We're seeing in Liverpool massive increases in the usage of the food pantries that we use. So much so, I've actually got the ethnic select committee coming to Liverpool at the end of February, and we're taking them around the food pantries, and that's cross-party. We're showing the efforts that are happening in the city, but we're going to show them why they're happening. So they've got a total understanding of why people are in such positions. So I've utilised my position as best I can as an MP since 2019 to put this at the top of the political agenda, allied to the community campaign outside politics, which is through fan support and food banks, and put right to food right at the top. If I just touch on some of the achievements, we had a letter which Ian pulled together, signed by 1,250 UK healthcare professionals. Ian's a consultant paediatrician at Alderey Hospital, professor in child health. He's instrumental to what we do within A Right to Food because, it's apolitical. He's just telling us exactly what's happening on the ground and what food poverty leads to, the life expectancy inequality, health inequality, malnutrition, and, long-term changes to a mother-to-be within the womb. So it affects the next generations, what's actually happened now regarding food insecurity. So Ian's unbelievable on that. He's also fantastic on housing and the impact housing has, and I've used them a lot when I've been in Westminster Hall debates on poor housing, the impact it has on people who are living within that poor housing. Well, I just want to touch on what it's actually achieved before. So we've had a motion passed at Labour Party conference. We've had a TUC Congress, passed the TUC Congress. Right to Food cities, Liverpool, Manchester, combined authorities, Rotherham, Brighton, Haringey, St Helens, Preston, Lancaster, Durham, Newcastle, Portsmouth, Coventry, Stoke, Sheffield, Birmingham, Portsmouth. We've got football clubs like Rangers and Celtic coming together. We're going to Belfast next week to speak with clubs from Protestant and Catholic communities coming together on A Right to Food. That's why I wanted to emphasise this. This is what you are as an organisation, which is about encouraging collectivism. That's what this campaign's about. It's about encouraging collectivism, knowing who your real enemy is and how we try to come together to achieve the change that we so desperately need. So that's where we are with the campaign. There's so much more I could talk about on it. But I think what we're seeing now as well is the re-emergence of the trade union movement. And as I alluded to before, standing on picket lines, speaking to the workers, outlining the situation. There's a wave of solidarity at the moment, which is across the country in every sector. And we've got the public opinion on our side. And that's why this will feed into, obviously, the protection of the NHS and what we believe the NHS needs to look like in the 21st century, and how we adhere to the principles which were instilled by Bevan and which still should underpin the future of the NHS. And to finish, I just want to touch on two things from a privatisation, examples of what's actually happened in my community, which feed into your association, because the health. Yesterday, 2 days ago, someone put a tweet out talking about football pitches for children in Liverpool, which were costing a Football Association hub £169 an hour. Now, with the cost of living crisis, so many cannot afford that. That is, for me, how privatisation is destroying the lives of our future generations, because it's stopping kids going to get exercise. It's excluding them from sport. And that's what's happened over the last 40 years with the absolute decimation of council-run services, which were there, free at the point of use. So everybody could participate and, ensure that they had a healthy standard of living. That, for me, encapsulate what's happening with society as a whole, from the NHS to football grounds. And we're seeing that fed into housing with the private landlords. It's just decimating our communities, and it's up to us, me as the politicians, you as a health association, to highlight this and ensure that the future of this country is built on socialist principles, because the last 40 years have shown us that this is the battle of our lives now, because we've reached a tipping point in society. And if we carry on going down the path we're going, I'm sure every single one of us here is extremely fearful for the future of working class communities and the future of this country. I'll leave it there. I could talk for hours, as you well know, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you very, very much, Ian. The people of Liverpool, West Derby are very fortunate in having such a powerful and enthusiastic advocate for social justice. Thank you so much. And the messages that you're putting across about hunger being a political choice is brutal and directly to the point. Obviously, a waiting list of over 7 million in the NHS is also a political choice. So thank you very much, Ian, for your contribution.
Okay, Ian, thank you very much for your introduction. What a mensch. I wish you were my MP. Just to say, I'm from Maidstone and the Wheels in Kent. And my question actually is about food sustainability. I picked up on that being mentioned quite a lot. One of the things that is seldom talked about, unfortunately, is how we deal with people when they do fall ill. I have a current very personal example of that, in that my mother just recently had a stroke at the beginning of the year, and she has had next to no advice about how to deal with her diet. And the evidence is stacking up, very, very good studies into the effect of your diet upon not just your physical health, but also your mental health. And one of the things that I think we need to look at, as well as with every area that we're discussing, is sustainability and the effect on the environment, in terms of how we deal with food inequality. I think one of the worst things is that the evidence shows very clearly that vegan and vegetarian diets, which tend to be anti-inflammatory, are far better for most people than anything that has any animal based products in it. But to have a diet like that, you need to know how to cook. And currently the cost to have a convenient vegan diet, let's say, is extremely high. So almost everything goes against the average person maintaining or taking up and maintaining a vegan or vegetarian diet. So I wanted to know, in your experience, is this something that's being discussed across the board? Because surely that is also part and parcel of food sustainability and food inequality.
Okay. Hi, Ian. Thank you so much. I'm proud to be talking to you from Worthing, where we're running the Right to Food South first event. So I'm sitting outside there. Proud to be part of a Worthing council that's elected a socialist council for the first time in 47 years. But I wanted to speak to you about, mostly I wanted to say thank you about giving midwives a voice. I'm a retired midwife, and I wanted to kind of catch up on what you were saying about midwifery and the state of midwifery. I do feel that midwives are losing their voice. They lost out, didn't have a ballot enough to strike and everything. And I think that people have to really, really think about that this is a public health crisis that we've got in front of us. And you touched on so many decent things around midwives' roles, but the reality of it is that midwives are burning out. Of 20, of every 30 midwives that qualify, only one goes into practice because they're burnt out before they even get there. They're used as staff. The sort of staffing that goes on is postnatal wards are being run with one midwife and a couple of maternity assistants for like 28 mothers and babies. Midwives are looking after 3 or 4 women on labour ward with complex mental, with complex needs, and people. And you touched on the infinite maternal mortality rate going up. You know, the highest cause of death in mothers now is suicide. And these are women who are known to services with severe mental health issues. So thank you for giving midwives a voice. And we hopefully are following your teachings about the health. I run a uniform bank, and that's the other thing, is that we have, we're on the affluent South Coast, and we have 1 in 4 children in poverty, living in poverty, and go to school without a coat or a pair of shoes. So it's all over the country. And as I said, I think it all is dovetailing into a massive public health crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Alison Schooler from South Wales. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Chair of SHA Cymru. By the way, midwives were planning to strike in Wales, but it has been called off at the moment because there's an offer come through which unions are considering. I'm also a retired midwife, and I had a particular interest in practice as a community-based midwife and also small-scale research on the topic of nutrition and diet and so forth. So I'm so glad, Ian, thank you so much to hear you mentioning the intergenerational issues, because if we fed everyone properly, then we would prevent many, many problems in pregnancy, and also the effects on the baby and the lifetime effects on that baby as that baby becomes an adult and an older person. So that is so important, and I do not think enough is being made of this, or has ever been. Back in the day, I used to go on about it in SHA Cymru, but I'm really glad that we're reviving this issue. I retired in 2011, and it's just so depressing thinking about the early 2000s, and we were talking about food banks and how they shouldn't be necessary. They were, you know, the sort of lesser evil, but how much worse it's become. I just wanted to mention that in Wales, of course, we had initiatives such as a breakfast club from the early 2000s in schools, and attempts to take, you know, to try and solve the problems at a societal level, to make the healthy choice the easier choice. But a lot of that went by the wayside, unfortunately. But we are now working, the Welsh Government is working in cooperation with Plaid Cymru towards universal free school meals in Wales. So I'm sure you're aware of that. But and also in SHA Cymru, we're planning an all members meeting of SHA Cymru on this very topic. And so we look forward to linking up with the rest of you, and particularly Ian, all the work you've mentioned in Liverpool. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for your contribution. I want to make 3 points. Just to stress the issue of intergenerational health inequalities that Alison actually raised, because we're now talking about feeding children, and the impact of poor school meals or absence of them is going to impact on their grandchildren. And I don't think that's always necessarily understood. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that the state has to intervene in this really important public health measure. The second point I wanted to make, relating back to the comment by an earlier comrade about Meals on Wheels, the importance of actually dual use of public facilities, so that meals facilities for schools should also be available for use in terms of the Meals on Wheels service. The third point I wanted to make was around the Independent Food Aid Network, Ian. And they've got an excellent Cash First campaign, and they also have an excellent leaflet that really focuses very sharply on the ways in which people's income can be maximised from existing range of benefits that are available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, for your comprehensive report on what's going on with regards to health and the food. I've just got back from South Africa. It was really interesting to be part of the Durban moment, the 1973 strikes, which are now 50 years. And what was so interesting was that there was an American delegation which came through from the IWG Dockers Union, and basically the issues were the same. That was quite interesting in terms of the global effect of what's happening with capitalism in terms of the pressures that people are having to face. It was really interesting to have the Americans talking about teaching South Africans about the slogan, an injury to one is an injury to all, because that was a UDF slogan in the 80s. But to get back to England, where I live in Oxford, it's been really, really quite an interesting time in terms of the campaigns that we've been involved in terms of food, especially during COVID. It really exacerbated the inequalities that people felt were kind of like sort of undertones in terms of what was happening. One of the things that I picked up on the issues of food was communities that felt, although they have existing food banks and the food that's being distributed in terms of the food banks, there was a real lack of sort of variety in terms of the cultural sort of aspirations. There are people that felt their food and was missing in terms of the different races that have different what you call diets, different dietary needs. The BAME communities felt that they were underrepresented in terms of the food that they felt was being given. But more than anything, people feel really it's all about focusing on their wages. It's so important that we don't really legitimize the food banks as the only alternative to actually feeding our communities. Our communities need a decent wage. They need to be able to go into the shops like everybody else and have a choice. People are working very hard and have to subsidize their incomes with food banks. That is not something that a country like the UK should be accustomed to. But also, I just wanted to take this opportunity as well to thank the people that in Oxford were really active in terms of mutual aid, Oxford Action, community action groups, giving people food during COVID. I was one of those people that was distributing that food, and they work ever so hard. But more than anything, we are in Oxford engaging in campaigns where now we're trying to educate people so that it's not just about food, but we are out there creating events and platforms where we are inviting people from different sectors to talk about their plight. And as recently as I think about 3 weeks ago, I had a huge meeting about the crisis in the NHS where we had Tony O'Sullivan, we have McManus, we had Rachel Ambrose, a nurse. So we try to bring a variety of different people on platforms. I had cost of living crisis, which involved a person that involved a worker that came from a CW, Communication Workers Union, a postal union. We had community leaders, we had nurses, a variety of people on the platform so that people can be informed from all different backgrounds. It's so interesting to see like a professor like Danny Dolling on the same platform as a worker from a postal union talking about different issues. And more than anything, having those types of people that wouldn't talk about certain issues like strike, saying we support public action, we support strike action, it has been very powerful. So this unity that has been created by this crisis is a very positive thing to happen.
Thank you. Thank Mark. And thanks, Ian. This is very quick. It's a question. So you talked about the significance of schools in communities, and as an educator, I totally agree with that, especially in this cost of living crisis and with a mounting public health crisis. So I'm in Hackney, where 1 in 2 children are growing up in poverty. I'm interested to know, in terms of the pilot in your constituency, with families using the school facilities in the evening, what evidence were you able to gather to bring to decision makers to demonstrate how effective a community kitchen could be with children and families? Thank you.
Thanks, Ian, so much. I'm involved in Right to Food London alongside Pat, who just asked a question. So it's lovely to see comrades here. Yeah, I think one of the things that I'd like to mention also is about the you talked about the kind of broader network of justice really that we're seeking, to tackle inequalities. And I represent a campaign called the Campaign for Real Care, who talk about, we're trying to basically get social care on equal footing with the NHS in terms of putting needs before resource, and obviously disabled people, older people, frail people are at the sharp end of all of these kind of issues, very much affected by food insecurity. So yeah, I'd like people to know about the Campaign for Real Care, so please look it up. And also, Ian, I'd like to know what your thoughts are around social care and how that could be brought in line with the NHS in this way. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Firstly, Ian, fiver is in the post for your overly kind words at the start of your speech. That was very generous of you. I'm always really taken by your determination to make sure people understand politics is about delivering real change at the very heart of it, and your way of making sure those with lived experience help sort and formulate the policy that you're then driving through with campaigns. In line with that, if there's one action you want people from this meeting to go away and take away and do something around the right to food, what would that be? Thanks, Chair.
Yes, Georgie can't speak, so I'm going to read out a little bit of an email she's sent, because it's slightly different from the food thing, but she was wanting to ask Ian particularly about cladding on high-rise buildings, because that's an issue that Georgie has been involved in. And in fact, the SHA last year did support that and gave a donation to the Fighting Fund for Cladak. What Georgie said is she knows that Ian was one of the MPs on the committee looking at that subject, the Building Safety Bill, but she says that there are still a lot of issues still to be done on that. In particular, the lack of planning about how remediation works will impact many people with conditions or who are disabled, because there have been major cuts to local authority funding, and central government appears to be ignoring the issue and placing the entire responsibility on local authorities. Cladak has met with the engagement team in the Department of Levelling Up, who clearly had no idea how to tackle the main issues, and there's not been an invitation to a second meeting, even though they were supposed to meet regularly. And there's a link to a blog that Cladak has done about this, which we're hoping will go onto the SHA website. So it was really to thank Ian for yet another area of work that he's involved in and campaigning on. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Ian, for all you've said today and all you do. 3 years ago, we set up a small food bank in the charity I'm involved with, and I've continued to organise and run that. And in recent months, we've seen probably a 40% increase in the number of people who are contacting us. And I know there is a problem sometimes with deserving poor and people who are seen as not being deserving. But my view is that there is always a story behind that, and there are often children behind that, and we don't judge and we just support people. However, what I do see is major issues with substance addictions, and it's become glaringly obvious to me that the support is not in the system out there to help people turn their lives around. So we are a sticking plaster, as you see, helping people to feed their children and, you know, taking whatever we give them without any choice. We just do the best we can. But how do you think the Labour Party is looking at this and will address the issues? Because clearly it's not just about criminalisation and locking people up, although clearly the dealers aren't getting dealt with because we see them and they're reported frequently, but nothing happens. But the fact that there's not decent rehab available or other support is a major issue, and I don't know how we're going to get away from this situation if there isn't concerted effort to support people. So thank you, but I'd really like to know if that's been looked at.
I've put a motion to SHA about actually looking at the impact of social determinants of health, because I think we need to do some work in supporting the sort of work that Ian's doing, but as a Socialist Health Association, because it's absolutely clear that social determinants of health are affecting life expectancy. And my own experience, I'm a local councillor in Newcastle, and Ian, I'm determined when he comes to the Liverpool match, we shall meet up. I'm a local councillor, and I've taken on the role of food champion because nobody else would do it. And what I'm trying to do is pull ideas together, and I'm really keen on your 5-point framework. But my concern is, I've worked through mutual aid. Jabu raised the role of mutual aid, so important during COVID. And I'm still involved in local community-based mutual aid. But what I'm really angry about, really worried about, is how fair share, etc., the food overstocks basically end up being industrial food that we give to people to stop them starving. But what we're doing is we're reinforcing food inequality, we're reinforcing health issues, and we're not meeting people's cultural needs. Absolutely. So my motion really comes from my own experience, and I'd really like us as an organisation to pull together nationally and see if we can pull together some people who are experienced community-wise and with practical experience, really concerned about what you were saying, all those who are midwives are saying about the impact there. So yes, absolutely enthused by what you were saying, Ian, but I want to know how, I want to see how we can put this into practice locally, and also how as an association we can actually put that into a health, a socialist health framework. So thanks very much. I'll shut up there.
So Ian, can you come back and at least try and cover a few of the issues raised with you?
Mark, I'll whiz through and try and answer most of them if I can quickly. If anybody hasn't had a chance to ask a question, please email me. Please email me in so I can make sure that I do respond to anything that you want to raise. So we start at the top. Jessica made some fantastic points. I think it was covered as well by David. Home help. My nan was a home help. This is the sort of thing that we should be looking at bringing back under the Labour government, which would do so much to people who were isolated, and obviously the community kitchen elements of it as well was a part of ending that isolation. Because when we were talking about the children booking a table in the restaurants within the school, they were the extended families, friends were coming. It was fantastic to see. But for me, home help, again, that goes back to, what do we want as a society? What do we want, fundamentally want as a society? Public good over profit. Home help was fantastic in delivering that. And I know how much it's missed in Liverpool and across the country. So I think that's a huge battle that we should be fighting. Good luck to Pat today. Just retweeted it with Reading and all they're doing up there with all the good people. So I'll watch with interest. I did say I could try and go on a Zoom, but I've got that much on today. I couldn't get to Reading, unfortunately. Alison, really looking forward to working with Alison in Wales. Obviously, we've got the magnificent Beth Winter MP we're sharing office with, who fully believes in everything that we're doing on the right to food. And what Alison was touching about, obviously, from a Wifley perspective, it's false economy. What we're living in now is false economy. We've got to make sure that, obviously, generations are fed now, which is going to affect the next 40 or 50 years. And Ian always says, I'm sure the professionals on here, is when people come in, when the children come into his waiting room and he looks at them, he examines them, he starts formulating how long then they've got to live from a generational perspective, and because of how they live in the conditions, housing, food, poverty, and it's heartbreaking to hear them actually say that. And that's fundamentally what Alison was going to. David's contribution was fantastic. Touched on the community kitchens, David. AFAN, absolutely cash first. It's a key part of the right to food, which is obviously determining we get benefits that actually do what they're supposed to do and what the welfare safety net was supposed to do, which was ensure people in times of trouble had that net, and it could actually keep them afloat and live in a dignified manner. You know, when I was growing up in Council Farm in Liverpool on a council estate in the 70s, and my dad was out of work due to Thatcher's deindustrialisation and cast onto into poverty. We still had a roof above our head. We never used food banks. We could survive, and that's not happening now, obviously, with what's happening with food banks. Jabu, fantastic contribution. Look forward to working with you in Oxford. Funny, I was in Kenya last week with CAFOD, looking at what's happening with the drought and the humanitarian catastrophe that's unfurling there. And when you went into Nairobi and you seen them talking about Nairobi growing into this economy and, you know, middle income economy and blah, 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 high rise flats. And then within the middle of Nairobi, there's 1 million people living in a shanty town in absolute abject poverty. Capitalism in a nutshell. So look forward to working with you regarding what you're doing in Oxford. Pat touched on the Evans Community Kitchen. So Food for Thought, the non-profit organisation that run a lot of the schools and the kitchens within the city and beyond, actually. They're pulling together, Pat, a full analysis of what it cost, what it brought. What I will say is, we always say about cost, don't we? And we always say about, you know, what bang for your buck. Going in that place and seeing families coming together, seeing mums and dads who never had the opportunity to speak to each other at the gate, from so many different communities, coming together, sitting down, breaking bread together with the children, and that intergenerational elements of it in a warm environment with good food. I can't put a monetary value on it. It was absolutely immense, and it shows what can be done. But again, it needs funding. It needs looking at how we actually do that. And again, that ties into the Meals on Wheels, home health elements of it. We need to be looking what we've got now as a resource. This is the next Labour government. What we've got with resources in our community, and how we ensure that people who are struggling can eat well, stay warm in a dignified manner. I hate warm banks. I hate the idea of them. I hate food banks. So we need to be looking at ways and means of making sure that the people who are struggling do not feel as though they're getting thrown out to the wolves, they're getting demonised, they're getting stigmatised, because it could happen to any single one of us that we need assistance, and that shouldn't be wrong to ask for assistance. Charlie touched on Right to Food London, immense organisation. I'm so proud of what Sharon and the team and everybody involved with that have done, because what it's done for me is open doors. I've had 2 meetings with Islington Council over the last 3 weeks, seeing how they embed a right to food within what they're doing as a council. There's other councils across London now are looking at this. I talked to the Khan's team on Monday about a right to food, and Right to Food London are absolutely at the forefront of that activism, that push, that change for social justice. So I'm proud to call you comrades, and I look forward to working together with you moving forward. Nathan, well, I mean, you know, what he's doing with COVID justice, and we'd be working together on the Hillsborough Law on that. He talked about actions. There's people here who are far cleverer than me and far more able to shape what they can do for the Right to Food campaign, and also fight within inequality within their area using the SHA. So, you know, I'll do whatever you need me to do to work with us on the Right to Food campaign and other campaigns. But I'd like you to come up with that working group, tangible elements of how you can assist what we're seeing now in our communities. Because as a working with the Incinerator, it's been inspirational, working with people from that ilk, with that expertise, who can deliver so much to helping this campaign move forward, because it's really powerful in Parliament when you stand up and you quote what's happening, and it's not a left-wing politician from Liverpool speaking, it's coming from what's happening on the front line of the NHS and in communities, from the practitioners and the experts. That's really important. Georgie touched on cladding. Yeah, with the Level Up Margin Committee, we've been pushing it, highlighting the injustice again. It goes right to where we are as a country with the social injustice of what people experienced in Grenfell. You know, the parallels with Hillsborough are unbelievable. But then the people who are now living in the flats, which need remediation, and the slow moving of the government. I will say there's and unexpectedly probably to hear me say this, but Gove, if he delivers what he's talking about, will make a difference, and he does make a difference. He does seem to get it. You speak to the campaigners around this issue, at least he listens, and hopefully he'll do more than listen and actually enact what he's talking about doing. Our job on the Levelling Up and Housing Committee selectively to keep holding the feet to the fire on that, because it's absolutely abhorrent what's happening. People who are trapped in them buildings. Touch on the disabled elements. I work with a fantastic man called Chris Waterman, and we're looking at the peeps. As I know, there's Labour MPs are pushing this as well. Obviously, the evacuation plans to go into legislation, you know, and that's a really important part of what we're doing as well on the LUHC, but also my role as an MP. If Georgie wants to drop me any emails about what's about their campaign group, please do so, and then I can inform what we're doing that work on that committee. What Leslie touched on, encapsulated austerity. How do we, you know, what do we need with regards, you know, the ability to help people who are substance abuse fall on our time? To tell you what we need the recapitalisation of councils and all them services, what's been lost and decimated. You know, Liverpool's lost 68% of its funding. They're still trying to take 70 million, I think, out of us this year. There's nothing left to cut. City's on its knees. That's replicated right across every community. We know that through the LGA, and we know by various witnesses on the select committees what we're talking about now, because this levelling up nonsense, what they're talking about, is just a political shop to determine if they can stay in positions as MPs, I think, and a government's got us doing nothing. You know, when you see Tory leafy shires getting levelling up funds accepted, and the likes of Liverpool doesn't get one. Sidney talked about London, I think 2 out of 48. The areas what need it the most and not getting any assistance from this government. So, you know, again, it's about local authorities being recapitalised, and that's something I'll certainly be pushing as a Labour MP. Theresa touched on, oh yeah. So in Newcastle, I'm going up, but hopefully going up next week. Hopefully not to get chunked by Newcastle, but I'll be seeing Bill. So I hope I can see you, Theresa. I hope you can get down there. I'll send Bill the times when we're ready due. Obviously, we bring a donation from Liverpool for the food bank, as we always do, but we always have an Natter then in the Irish club. So it'd be good if you're around and we can have a chat, see how we can link up. What I will say is we've got councils like Islington who mentioned. I've spoke to councillors in Cumbria who are now looking at embedding the right to food within all policy decision making. Liverpool are putting it in their Labour Party manifesto. I'm still waiting to work out how that's going to look, and it's not just warm words. We need actions. We need it put from a public health perspective, hardwired into policy decision making in Labour councils and hopefully beyond. And I think that's where we'll get the right to food really kick-started through the fantastic work that's getting done in London on like the university school meals. You look at Tower Hamlets. You look at other community councils within London who are actually pushing that. Hopefully we can sort that out in Cumbria. Hopefully Newcastle you can push. So any councillors on here, I think we need to be having them conversations collectively as well, how we can embed and hardwire the right to food into local councils. And I think that's it. So you know, it's been a real privilege. We could speak all day. I could speak all day to you. I could listen to you all day. But rest assured, my job in Parliament is to represent the working class, is to fight for legislative changes which affect the 99% and make their lives better. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'll carry on doing while I'm here. I really look forward to working with everyone on this call in the SHA. Because it's a really important organisation. I need someone to affiliate to West Derby as well really quickly. So we need to be looking at that as well, how that works, so I can work with you within my own constituency. But again, a real pleasure. Keep up the good work. It's going to be so important moving forward for so many reasons, which we haven't discussed. I see Nico was on the call asking a question. I'm sure he would have raised it. But I'll be speaking to people offline as well about obviously the direction of travel of the Labour Party and what we can do to ensure that the principles of what Bevan hardwired into the NHS, they're the way forward. That's what we need. And the NHS is the absolute bedrock of fighting inequality in this country, and that needs to be remain paramount. So thanks very much, comrades, for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure.
I'm proud about the National Health Service. It's a piece of real socialism.